let's just start off with the most topical issue, which this is purely from my perspective. So as some clarity, can you just provide us with some information to the best of your knowledge of what the situation is with the, if I can call it the Queensland, New South Wales building bubble, in terms of how that's been rolled out, and if there's any last minute adjustments or any sort of updates you can give us in terms of how that's been implemented?
Sure. So the Queensland government is quite nervous about the fact that the virus is slowly creeping north from Sydney. And we all know it's in Newcastle, which isn't too far south. And they're a little bit worried about the fact that the New South Wales government still allows people to travel fairly freely within the state. And so they've put in place some measures to try and protect Queensland. They've come up with this interesting solution where they've created, they're calling it a border zone. I refer to it as a bubble that runs from Tweed Heads on the New South Wales side of the border to around Beenleigh on the Gold Coast. And people within that bubble are allowed to travel across the New South Wales border with a permit. But if you're outside that bubble, you're not allowed to cross the border. So people to the south of Tweed Heads are not allowed into Queensland, and people north of the Gold Coast aren't allowed to travel across the border into New South Wales. It's an interesting concept. It has, there's some logic to it. There's no doubt about that. We know that people who live on the border and, work or have kids that go to school on the other side have had some challenging times over the last few months. But it has created some frustrations. I think the government underestimated or doesn't have a very good understanding of how mobile our industry is and how far builders and trades travel on a daily basis to get to a job site. So, we've been, since those measures were implemented, at 1 a.m. Saturday morning with about 24 hours notice, we've been inundated with phone calls from builders who live on the Gold Coast and are doing work south of the Tweed, Brunswick Heads, Byron Bay, Ballina. There's a lot of work going on in those regions, and a lot of the work is being undertaken by builders and trades that live on the Gold Coast. And, the rule is that if you're a Queenslander and you go over the New South Wales border and you travel beyond the bubble, then the only way you can return is via plane, and you have to isolate for 2 weeks. And so that's causing quite a bit of distress to many of our members because that's their livelihood. And while we understand we're trying to keep the virus out of Queensland, I think the speed at which that measure was introduced, has caused some challenges. And here we are on Wednesday, and we're still getting phone calls from people saying, "What's this about the border being closed? What am I hearing?" So they're still just becoming aware of it, and that's a real challenge.